Welcome to EPG Pathshala. I am Dr. Shati Biswas from the Department of Islamic History and Culture, University of Calcutta. Today we are going to discuss from the paper Indian Polity, the module, the Mughal administration. We have to understand that Mughal administration starts with the advent of the Mughals in India in 1526. The administration initially was inherited from Delhi Sultanate, and the earlier two Mughals did not much change the administration because they did not have the time. So today the course of today's paper is to study the Mughal administration system, its central administration, and then we will discuss the provincial administration, and from there we move to the local administration. In my introductory words, I have to say that Babur brought the legacy of the Timurid belief of divine right to the ruler, which was already existing in India, but it was far more so important to the Mughals. The Humayun too followed this suit. In India, they were able to lay down an elaborate administrative system which continued till the advent of the British. The Mughal administration was essentially the creation of Akbar. It was essentially the creation of Akbar because the first two rulers of the Mughals were facing such political turmoil that they did not have any scope to build the administration at length. Followed by his successors, Akbar's successors, some alterations were done in the later period. The administration was based on liberal idea of incorporating all religion, caste and creed with an emphasis on the credentials and excellence. Frequent intrigues and problems did occur in the course of time, but they had checks and balances to control that problem. The regency of Bairam Khan paved the way to Akbar's excellence. The main source about the administration of Akbar and his time is from the account of Abul Fazl and his Ain-i-Akbari. Apart from that, the contemporary sources at length had written about the Mughal administration. So we do not find the paucity of sources as we find in the Delhi Sultanate context. Let's move to the central administration, or the core of the administration, that was headed by the king himself. Before I start central administration, we have to understand the concept of suzerainty as it laid down in the Central Asian mode, which was followed into the Indian context. Royalty, as per Abul Fazl, was the divine gift and manifested in the form of a light from the above, that is Fari-Izidi. The royal not to be challenged or refuted, that was the context in which the administration was laid. Allegiance and loyalty was the duty of the subjects of all the subordinates. This was more so of a Sasanian concept, which was reflected also in the writings of the Babur. But in India, this was not something new. To some extent, from ancient times, this context was followed till the medieval period. So it was not that something as a concept, it was new for the people. Akbar, what he did was he added certain Muslim and Hindu ideologies to give it a shape. The king was bestowed paternal love and duty to his subject in lieu of the allegiance and loyalty that he had. Now, in the writings of Abul Fazl, it is interesting to note that he divides the society into different classes which were convenient to his time. He divided the society into warriors, artisans, merchants, learned class, and the laborers. Now, this division is also very close to what we had in the concept of the Greek notion of society, but it was also during the Mauryas that the society was rough and about divided in this way. This attitude obviously was very appealing to the caste divided Hindu society, which did not revolt to a concept of the Mughals. And on the other hand, it also could incorporate the Persian belief to which the Mughals were quite known to. The duty of the royalty is to maintain the peace and balance in the society, restricting all to the duty. The concept of state depended a lot on the concept of medieval secularism. When I say medieval secularism, I mean that where the center very conveniently could use either the Hindu ideologies or the Muslim ideologies to keep his subject loyal to him. The concept of a state was a typical secular polyreligious state based on composite ruling class, based on equal justice and divine rule, believing in liberal absolutism. The society not even for once was described as Darul Islam or the abode of Islam, because that would not have been very convenient for the Mughal rulers. And this was the legitimate reason why we see that during the time of Akbar, jizya was abolished. The above concept was further enhanced by the idea of Dar-ul-Sul or the abode of tolerance. But this tolerance, one has to understand, had to be in the context of the loyalty of the people. Darul-Sul would only be convenient for the ruler himself. Thus, the conquest were not aggrandizement but a greater plan to establish a polity that would be a kind of an exceptional empire based on tolerance and justice. Now, Babur and Humayun, as we have earlier said, that had no time to bring about any significant change. Few changes we find that was formulated by Sher Shah, but he also had very little time. But he did give a shape to the administration that got a boost during the time of Akbar. Akbar therefore inherited a system that was laid down by the Delhi Sultanate, but had at its decaying stage. Akbar turned his attention towards reorganizing the government and create adequate checks and balance. The process started by segregation of the department. It was understood that the revenue and the military system had to be divided if there has to, otherwise there could have been some kind of chaos or upheaval. The arrangement of the government in case was not much touched in case of the lower rung. So the sarkars or the parganas were not much altered. Therefore, this kind of rearrangement did not touch the common people. So, since it did not touch the common people, it did not face any commotion whatsoever. And only this reshuffling took place in the higher strata of the government, and it led to a corruption-free government to its possibility. The province were a kind of a replica of the center. So what we have is a very, very strict central administration, which was again copied in the provinces, that is when the provinces were divided. The rules and regulations were laid down categorically with the responsibility of the officials very well spelled out. The regulation was also brought about in a form of a book which was called Dastur-ul-Amal, like the modern times. So all the regulations, the duties were laid down in Dastur-ul-Amal, and therefore an official could always go back to the rule book. During Akbar's initial years, following the above suit, his guardian or Atalik or Vakil, Bairam Khan, became all-pervasive wazir. So in the initial years, what he did was he tried to segregate the institution of the Vakil from the post of the Prime Minister. So Akbar, taking things in his own stride when he could, brought an end to this system of wakalat or vakil, and this he repeated to ensure that next onwards none of the vakils could become very important. The camp of Bairam Khan, who was the guardian of Akbar at one point of time, was later led by Maham Anaga. He was taught a lesson by the punishment of Adam Khan for stabbing Ataka Khan. The signal was well sent, and it was understood that the power of Vakil now is going to be relegated to the back. The next Vakil, Munim Khan, was posted to Jaunpur in 1567, and the post of Vakil was kept almost vacant for 7 years. And therefore, it was understood that the post of Vakil became a kind of a favor and not very significant to administration. In 1595, Mirza Aziz Koka was made the Vakil and remained in the post till his death. He did not have much role in the administration, thus then the post was reduced just to a royal favor without much significance in the government. The post in Akbar's time was not part of any department, and then it did not exist anymore. Now let us move to the department and the ministries in central government. What we have to understand that Akbar's contribution to Indian polity was basically segregating administration into different ministries, into different departments, essentially the revenue administration and the military administration. In all other medieval states, what we find is the revenue administration and the military administration being mixed into one, and therefore giving rise to chaos and political revolt. The contribution of Akbar is that he understood this at a very tender age, and in the initial ages, time altogether, he segregated these two very important ministries. Now let's move to the first important department of finance, or the revenue department. The department was headed by someone called Diwan, which was later also known as Wazir. He headed the department essentially headed by Wazir, looked into all kind of income and expenditure of the department. The term Diwani Ala was later used more generally instead of Wazir. The men who were raised to this position were handpicked by the emperor himself and usually came from very humble background based on their quality. They were not given high ranks or mansabs, so therefore they were not in a position to control the military at all. At times more, one person was designated as a Diwan. The Diwan essentially came from the class of Ahali Kalam, or the learned class. Of course, in few occasions, they were also came from the military positions. The Department of Finance, with Muzaffar Khan, Raja Todarmal and Khwaja Shah Mansoor in the initial years, gave the real shape to the excellent finance department by laying down the Dahsala system, which we will consider learning later, with other essential regulations. The significant persons associated, therefore, with this initial years, we have to understand, was Raja Todarmal. It is believed that he served Sher Shah too. Todarmal did excellent work as the Diwan of Gujarat till 1573, when he was noticed by Akbar, after which he was brought to the center and made the Mushrif-e-Diwan, or kind of an assistant Diwan. This post was higher compared to the Diwan, but it was lower than the Vakil in its concept. Raja Todermal, along with Khwaja Shah Mansoor, proposed the empire to be divided into 12 provinces with a governor and a diwan separately in each of the provinces. This was more of a replica of the central structure, with difference that the governor and the diwan will be placed in a check and balance position. The new Dhasala system of revenue collection was then worked out by the Khwaja Shah Mansoor. At this juncture, Todermal was moved to Bengal and Khwaja Shah Mansoor wrongly executed for hatching a conspiracy. Now, this was a problem that was created in the initial years in the finance department. Todermal was recalled back and made the head Diwan, and he continued for 10 years till his death and brought significant change to the revenue system. After Raja Todermal, the department was well set for the future, and we find that no other changes were made till the time of Aurangzeb, with very slight variations here and there. Now, the revenue department actually served as the backbone of the Mughal Empire. The Mughal Empire, based on the income offset by the revenue department, laid the foundation of the large empire that it had. Now, moving on to the second important department, the military department. The military department was headed by Mir Bakshi. This post existed even during Balban's time and was named as Diwani Ars. The real difference with Diwani Ars of the time of Balban or Delhi Sultanate is that there was no segregation from the revenue, clear segregation from the revenue department. The post was created during Akbar's time by segregation from the finance department, and it kept in balance between the two most powerful departments. The recruitment of the army, inspection of the horses, and the muster of the troops at regular intervals was its task. As all the nobles were given military ranks in the system, this department was the core of the military ranks of all the empire. Mir Bakshi enjoyed a huge importance as he presented all other personnels in the department to the emperor. He maintained separate register for mansabs in the military and civil services. Promotions were obviously passed through him. He was in charge for arranging the disposition of the troops, and he was the sole paymaster for the military. He was not the commander-in-chief though. In the system, in the Mughal military system, the commander-in-chief, and therefore he was in control of the troops. The branding and verification of the soldiers were all the mansabdars were done by him. He was also responsible to take all the visitors who came to the empire to the emperor, and he presented them before they left the country. The public darbar therefore always had his either his assistants or himself, so that he could be at beck and call of the emperor for official purposes. The intelligence department was also looked after by Mir Bakshi. Reports from the spies or Wakia Navis went to the emperor through him. So it was very important for him to be the right kind of a person, and his choice was also made by the emperor himself. The palace guards and their rewards was arranged by this department and solely by Mir Bakshi. He arranged the royal camps and allotment of the places within the camp to different accompanying mansabdars. The appointment, after being made for all the departments, were then sent to the wazir for allotment of the jagis, and then returned back to the Mir Bakshi for final presentation to the emperor. So therefore, the military department and the revenue department had to work in hand in hand, but the key position was controlled by the emperor himself. The procedure of promotion was very complicated, but it was controlled by the military department. Technically, the Mir Bakshi and the Wazir or Diwan were the two most important positions that was kept in the check and balance mode for the power game at the center. Now, we move on to the third important department. We have to understand the department of household was something very new to the Mughals. The Mughals were actually heading the largest empire at that time of Asia. So their household had to be controlled as a department. This department did not exist in the time of Akbar, or at least the records say that it did not form a department during that time. So Abul Fazl does not write much about this department of household. It was merely the creation of Jahangir and Shah Jahan. This department of household was headed by Mir Saman. The department did not have any precedence in West Asia or even in Delhi Sultanate. During Akbar's period, we did have something called the head of the karkhanas. Karkhanas, or the royal karkhanas, where items were produced for the consumption of the royalty or the sale of which went to the royal houses directly. And the head of these karkhana was called the Diwani Bayutat. It is believed that later this Diwani Bayutat was known as Mir Saman. The factories and the stores of the center were called karkhanas, and this could produce the guns, the artilleries, the daggers, weapons, and even the luxury items for the use of the upper echelon or the royalty. The department maintained the horses and elephants for the army and the beasts of burden like camels, mules, asses, and which was used not only by the army but the royals for their personal use. Gradually, this was considered as a very important responsibility that had to be controlled by a department. It was a kind of manufacturing agency producing items for the royal family. It purchased and stored all the items used by the royalty. As military purchase was done through this department, again Mir Saman worked in consultation with the Mir Bakshi. The karkhanas under this department had a daroga for inspection and an accountant or a mushrif for the looking after the administration. Now let us move to the fourth important department of the center, that is the Department of Justice. This department was headed by Sadr al-Sudur, and he was the head of the ulemas. The emperor usually consulted him in case of all the justice matters. He was also called the Chief Qazi or the Qazi ul-Quzzad, and appointed all other qazis of the provinces. In spite of the presence of the Sadr, one has to understand the final court of appeal was the emperor himself, and he heard cases with the help of a mufti and not Sadr al-Sudur. So therefore, Sadr al-Sudur was also kept under check, and he did not become all-pervasive or all-powerful. The education system was controlled by the Sadr, but one has to understand that this education system was essentially the Islamic education system. The Hindu education system was not looked after by the department, and it was given full right to the Hindu community. He distributed madad-e-maash in the form of land and cash. Now the interesting part is this made him a very, very important personnel. Madad-e-maash are the endowments that are given to the royalty or the scholars or people in need that the state thought. These were revenue-free lands. According to Badauni, Sheikh Abdul Nabi during the time of Akbar distributed huge lands as endowment to the religious order. This amount of land was never distributed in future. Akbar later made a reform by which the Khalisa land or the land controlled by the center was separated from Aima or the revenue-free land grants. So Khalisa lands earlier became a part of Madadi Marsh, but this later was segregated in the rule book. Now this made the endowment policy more transparent, and it did control also the power of Sadr-u-Sudur. The revenue-free lands were divided then into 6 groups, and each was placed under separate official, and the power of Sadr-u-Sudur was there just to recommend. Now, this is how the center functioned, with clear-cut, watertight 4 departments, all departments kept under check and in the control of the royal houses. Now, moving on to the provinces, one has to understand that each of the province was a replica of the center. Now, the functioning of the provincial government. In 1580, Akbar for the first time tried to divide the empire into subhas. Now, we have to understand the concept of subha was already, or the province was already there during the time of Delhi Sultanate, and we did have regional powers cropping up from the subhas. After the incorporation of all these areas into the Mughal Empire, it became essential for the ruler to divide the empire into according to the regional character, into different units. In this system, the land was divided into iktas under the muktis. Now, iktas under the muktis were a system that was initiated by the Delhi Sultanate, but continued till the time of the Mughals. The muktis had executive power and the power to collect taxes. So they were responsible for the upkeep of law and order too. The muktis who were more powerful with the control of strategic locations were called walis. Now all of this was inherited by the Mughals. In 1580, the big change happens where Mughal Empire for the first time was divided into 12 subhas. Now these 12 subhas were altered at times, but essentially the geographical position remained the same. The subadar, or the person who was the key controller of the subha, was also at times called the Sipah Salar. The subadar was assisted by a diwan who controlled the revenue, a bakshi who controlled the army, a qazi who looked after the judiciary, and a mir adal for justice. A kotwal was also there in charge of the civil law and order, and a mir bahar controlling the river administration and ports, and a wakya navi for as a news writer. Now the governor did not appoint his subordinates. What therefore happened was, all these appointments were made by the center, and the governor remained merely a senior colleague. Therefore, the issue of checks and balance was same even in case of the provinces. Now, later what we see is the area of Orissa was annexed and it was included in the Suba of Bengal. So the new areas that were being annexed or had to be incorporated in the Subas. Present Uttar Pradesh and Haryana was divided into the 4 main provinces, namely Awadh, Allahabad, Agra and Delhi. The area of Kashmir was included into Kabul, The Deccan states of Khandesh, Berar and Ahmednagar was always under a viceroy who was a prince royal of royal blood. In 1586, as an experiment, the Subas were placed under two governors, but this system was later abandoned because it led to much of the acrimony. Interestingly, during Akbar, the province of Kabul and Agra was placed under a Muslim and a Rajput Raja as joint commander. Likewise, the province of Lahore and Ajmer was placed exclusively under Rajput Rajas. It is believed that this kept the communal harmony of the state in balance. Now, each province was again divided into sarkars and parganas, which were the smaller units of administration. In course, therefore, like Mewar was included in the Sarkar of Chittor and Kota is mentioned as the Pargana of Sarkar Ranthambore. The sizes of the provinces varied. Like Bengal was the largest with 24 Parganas, while Multan just had 3 Parganas. So there was no strict rule for the provinces as far as its area is concerned. The governors were the vice-regents of the emperor responsible for general law and order and welfare of the subjects. They acted as a commander of the provincial army. A governor helped the Diwan in collection of the taxes by controlling the errand zamindars. So overall what can say is governor helped all other subordinate officials in their functioning but did not control the officials. It was he who was kept looking for the trouble errand zamindars who could otherwise become disloyal and pose a problem to the state. He also helped him in the supervision of welfare projects like building dams, sarais, gardens and reservoirs, and also repairing of the older ones. He also looked after the general law and order. The term of the governor was not fixed and avoided any complications. They were regularly transferred. Now let's move to the next important power position in the provinces, that is the Diwan. Diwan was the second most important person in the Subha. Initially, he was appointed by the governor, but later from 1595, he was appointed by the centre with the recommendation of the chief Diwan. He collected the revenue and had to spend a fortnightly report to the centre regarding the cash in hand. He audited the account and had to look after the charitable land grants. So he actually did the function of the Diwan that was done in the centre. So it was just a replication of what he was doing in the provinces. With the help of the Amil in the Sarkar, he also had to look into the improvement of cultivation, and this gave him enough scope to control the Amir, who were actually his subordinates. Now this point of course is not mentioned by Abul Fazl, because we find that this control of between the Amil and the Diwan was a later feature. The Bakshi in the province acted merely as the head of the intelligence service, and he was more in conversation with the centre. But of course, because of this, he had an antagonistic relation of the governor. Now, in the Mughal history, we find many cases where the Bakshi got into direct confrontation with the governor, and thus one is believed that Bakshi acted as an agent of the centre. The Sadr distributed the grants and headed the judiciary. Of course, there was another position of the Qazis in the provinces who were assisted by Mir Adal, and this post was created to keep the notorious Qazis at bay. So the judiciary was always under check in the provinces. The Sadr therefore was heading the distribution of the grants and had no role to play in case of direct justice. Direct justice was controlled by the Qazi and held by Mir Adal. Mir Adal was always, both Qazis and the Mir Adal were appointed by the centre. The Kotwal looked after the civil order of the cities. He also controlled the gambling and prostitution houses. The weight and measures were checked by him, apart from looking after general amenity. Now, one therefore has to understand the provinces were more like states of today, of the modern India, where every aspect of the civil life, every aspect of person's judicial life was looked after by centre and was well in control. But of course, certain amount of regional liberty was given to them. Now let us move to the last segment of this discussion, the local government. The local government, as has been said earlier, was not much changed by the Mughals. The unit of Sarkar within the province was controlled by a person, official called Faujdar. He controlled the general administration. He also was assisted by someone called Amal Guzar, who was in the responsibility of collecting revenue. But then he controlled the armed forces too. Now, it is believed that armed forces were needed at times to collect the revenue, and as the revenues were pretty high. The Qazi was responsible for general justice of the Muslims, and whenever a party in dispute was a Muslim. The Parganas was controlled by a Shikdar who looked after the administration. The revenue was collected by an Amil, and Kanungos determined the boundaries of the Parganas and the villages and kept the records. There are several clerks within working under these officials, and they were called the Karkuns. The role of the Karkuns, of course, is not laid down well, but the term has been there in use till the advent of the British. The functioning of the system was very complex, as one can understand, for the foundation of the empire. The ruler was the set standard for all the nobles, and it was his role was very important for the proper functioning of this complex system. The ruler appeared before the subject in the morning, and this appearance was known as Jharokhai Darshan, and it is believed that the administrative system initiated each day with this Jharokha-i Darshan. So it was a kind of a direct control of the ruler and his subject. During the time of Akbar, this direct complaint was also taken and justice was meted right away. But during Shah Jahan's period, what we find is clerks collecting these complaints and reports and reported to the emperor, and then some justice was meted. The ruler regularly attended the Diwani arm or the public darbar and continued the official work for the day there. The private business was attended in a hall called Diwani Khas. Apart from this, he made regular visits to the karkhanas to look into the economic system, which was controlled by the centre. The administration was well knit and continued till the time of Bahadur Shah, with very little changes, because the real foundation was done by Akbar himself. The system made the rulers accessible to his subjects, and through a proper organized justice system was able to establish good governance, or at least a serious attempt was made. Now let us summarize the discussion that we have done. The Mughal administration tried to give a uniform administration to its people. The centre tried to control through proper check and balance the administration. The emperor was a source of power and had the authority to remove any person at any pretext. The administration functioned smoothly during the time of the imperial Mughals. The Mughal administration was based on secular principle involving religious as well as secular policies that was convenient to the center. For further reference, we have to look into the e-text and the glossaries and bibliographies given there. Thank you.